Good morning and welcome to Daylight Church Online. We're just so thankful that you're joining us this morning and hope that you have a great experience. We want to let you know that if you'll go to mydaylightchurch.com, there's a card there that says Online Church. And on the Online Church card, it'll tell you everything you need to know about being a part of our online church community, how you can get involved in small groups, how you can give financially, how you can be involved in the service projects that we do. So even if you're in Kansas or Cambodia, you can sure join us and be a part of our church. We'd like you to check it out there and introduce yourself. So go to mydaylightchurch.com and check out the online church card. Thanks. We've been talking about self-care, and today we're talking about taking a great vacation. But before we dive into more about self-care, I want to talk about some of the rules. Dun, dun, dun. Are you ready? The 10 Commandments. And every time I hear about the 10 Commandments, I think about Mel Brooks' History of the World Part 1, where Moses comes down from the mountain with 3 big stone tablets. And he says, I declare to you this day these 15. And he drops one of the tablets and it shatters on the ground. He says, these 10 Commandments for all to obey. But the 10 Commandments are pretty straightforward. They're things like don't worship idols, don't murder, which sounds like a good idea. And it's interesting, each one of these is a little complicated if you actually get into the original language and the original intent behind them. So people question, does don't murder mean never kill? Is just war justified? Is capital punishment justified? You get into some wild questions, and I'm not going to get into that today, and I'm not putting the whole thing on the screen. I'm just kind of laying out there sort of what they say. For example, don't lie. And most English translations, does anybody know how it's usually translated? Yeah, don't bear false witness, which sounds like you're at a court case and you're standing up in front of a judge. And the original language does that, but not quite. And so if you go with don't bear false witness, you might think, well, I can lie freely as long as I'm not in front of a judge. And it actually means don't practice deceit or don't do intentional falsification. And I put don't adulterate, which doesn't quite fit. It says, most English translations say don't commit adultery. And it is very specific, this language about it's a person having sex with another man's wife. A man having sex with another man's wife is kind of the literal interpretation, but it goes much deeper than that. And adulterate is an interesting word because to adulterate something is to add something that didn't belong in the first place and to make something tainted. So if you adulterate, Bill works in chemistry, and if you adulterate some paint goop, it means you've added something to the solution that didn't belong. And that's kind of sort of what's going on here in a marital relationship, is you're adding something that never belonged in the first place. And are we all feeling a little bit heavy right now? Don't steal. Shoplifting is a bad idea. And then in this list of don't worship idols and don't murder and don't lie and don't adulterate and don't steal is one that says take one full day every week and do no work. Which, if you played a game of which one does not belong, this one stands out pretty quickly, doesn't it? But this is one of the 10 big commandments that God issued to the Israelites, to the people. When Moses came down from the mountain of God, where God apparently etched in stone with his own finger the rules, one of the rules was take every seventh day completely off and do nothing. It's kind of mind-blowing if you think about it. And so you have to ask why. Like, why would this be such a big deal to God? Why would God possibly include taking a day off with do not murder? It seems like there may be some weightier concerns that could have been added to the list. And so I want to run through this list one time and talk about the attitude or the heart behind them. And sort of in this question of why would this be one of the laws, is the question of who is God and what is God like. And if you approach these 10 commandments from a wrathful God that's out to get you, he's arbitrarily deciding that this is how the rules are going to be, and I'm setting them up because I'm God and I can do so, and you are expected to obey because you are my subjects, I'm the master, you are the slave, bada boom, bada bing. They read a certain way. And I want to read through them quickly that way. Don't worship idols. This is a jealous God that says, I am the only God, and you are only to worship me. Don't murder. Says, I'm not having you kids messing around, jumping on the couch anymore and throwing yourselves around at each other. I'm not tolerating it. Cut it out. Be good. Don't lie. I expect you to tell the truth or you're bad. I'm watching you. I'm Santa. You better watch out. You better not cry. You better not pout. I'm telling you why. I'm watching you. I see you when you're sleeping. I know when you're awake. I know if you've been bad or good. Be good for goodness sake. Don't adulterate. Don't commit adultery. Don't steal. If you read these as a wrathful God, then you arrive at this one and you say, well, what the heck is that all about? And he's saying, I'm establishing a rule to determine whether you're good or bad, and you're going to obey the Sabbath. You're going to take one day every week and do nothing to honor me because I am worthy of your honor. I'm worthy of your praise. I'm worthy of you taking a day off and focusing on me. And it's kind of a narcissistic, self-centered God that says, I'm establishing the rules for my sake. But then there's a second way of reading through this list, and we're going to read through it again, that says, I'm watching out for you. I care about you. I care about your life. I want you to thrive. I want joy for your life. I want peace for your life. And I know that not worshiping idols will contribute towards that. I know if you turn your worship towards the wrong stuff, whether it's actually a literally manufactured idol of a god or whether it's something else that you've put in a place of God, a job or a person or money or wealth or cars or sex or whatever the thing is, he knows what it takes to be a thriving human being and what it is to experience shalom or eirene, this peace that we've talked about so much in here in Hebrew and Greek. And it's a different perspective on the rules when we start to take a different perspective on what God looks like and who God is and how he approaches things. Don't murder. He's not saying I'm trying to establish who the good people are and the bad people are, and the bad people kill people and the good people don't kill people. Instead, he's saying this is not how to thrive. He's saying this is not for your best. This is not the way. Violence is not the answer. When he says don't lie, he knows there's liberty in truth. There's liberty in reality. And he wants you to be liberated. Don't adulterate. Don't add stuff to your relationships that doesn't belong there. I want your relationships to be solid and sound and thriving and healthy. And you see, it's a different perspective. And so when you get to don't steal, it's the same thing. This is not the way to acquire life or to acquire material goods. And so when you get to this question of take one full day every week and do nothing, and you take it from the perspective of a good, loving father that looks down on you and says, I'm trying to describe to you what the best kind of life is, it changes your perspective on it. And so I'm gonna talk a little bit about Sabbath today. That's what this is called, the seventh day. You take a Sabbath day of rest. What traditionally has happened in churches many times is somebody preaches on Sabbath or reads about Sabbath, and it becomes this hard, fast law founded in the God that wants you to perform. That's not the plan at all. The plan is that we look at it from the perspective of this is something God has established to help us. And so I want you to turn to Mark chapter 2 with me. I left my Bible over here, my phone over here. I'm going to grab it. But go ahead and turn to Mark chapter 2. And for those of you unfamiliar, you can just Google Mark chapter 2 and it'll pop right up. Mark chapter 2, verses 23 through 27. One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields. So this is a day when they're not supposed to be working according to the law, right? It says, and as his disciples walked along, they began to pick some heads of grain. The Pharisees, the lawyers, the law people, the pedantic legalists of the world saw them doing this. And it says, look, why are they doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath? Jesus answered them, have you never read what David did when his companions were hungry and in need? In the days of Abiathar the high priest, he entered the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which is lawful only for priests to eat. And he also gave some to his companions. Then he said these words. And so we're trying to figure out which kind of God established this rule here. This rule of the Sabbath. Is it the angry, hammer-fisted God that said, you will obey and you will not work on every seventh day and you will worship me instead? You will refocus on me because I am everything. Or is it the God that said, you need to rest? I'm aware you need to rest, so I'm establishing guidelines. And Jesus says it this way. He says, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So Jesus answers the question for us of which kind of God established this law and which kind of God established the rule of the Sabbath. So as we talk about self-care, we've asked the question, what does self-care look like for the Christian? And we've talked about finances, and we've talked about friendships and meditation and so forth. We've talked about developing your character to be a person that is filled with the Spirit of God, that's peace and joy and hope and love and so forth. And we've kind of, or I say we a lot. I've asked the question from up here, is self-care just fuzzy slippers? And I kind of don't understand this picture unless she just wanted to show her legs off, because she's got the thick fuzzy sweater on, the thick fuzzy sweater. slippers and no pants. I don't get it. But is self-care just a good book with a hot cup of coffee and fuzzy slippers on a cold winter day? Is that the only thing that it means to be self-caring, or can you love yourself otherwise? And we've talked about how eating well and sleeping well and drinking enough water is self-care, and there's a lot of discipline built into self-care. And as we describe continuing on, we're going to talk about this idea that self-care requires work, which seems contradictory because rest requires work, but that's what we're going to get into today. I was reading about Sabbath rest this week, and one of the people said, remind yourself of what it was like as a child to wake up and scour the news to find out if your school was one of the schools that got a snow day. Wasn't it one of the, is there any better feeling in the world for teachers and students than that McCracken County Schools? I remember it scrolling by and going, yeah! It's just like, you mean I have no plan? Nothing. I'm going to eat food and watch TV and play video games, and I'm going to go back to bed for right now, and I'm going to take a hot shower or a hot bath. And it was just like, I get to indulge in rest. And he said, God commands that you have about 52 of those baked into every year. 52 of those days where you wake up and you sleep in a little bit, and you take a leisurely breakfast or some coffee and find a good book or find a good hammock to lay in. And this isn't a hammer-fisted God saying, you will do this. It almost contradicts the image of a hammer-fisted God. What kind of hammer-fisted God says, you will lay in a hammock today? It just doesn't work. So why take a Sabbath? We've talked briefly about why God would recommend a Sabbath, and that begs the question of why. So if we believe in this God that wants you to thrive, then what are the benefits of a Sabbath? The scriptures don't exactly lay it out for us, but I have some thoughts on the matter, which probably surprises all of you. Number one is that humans need siesta. If you're not familiar with the habit of siesta, or the practice of siesta occurs in a lot of Spanish-speaking countries. It also occurs in a lot of Asian countries like Thailand and Cambodia, where the heat of the day is pretty intense, and so they work from 6 in the morning until about 10 o'clock in the morning. It depends on the country when they take siesta. Some take siesta after lunch for the afternoon, but there's certain hours of the day where the people are expected to and given the liberty and the freedom to do nothing. I've seen the rice fields in Cambodia, and during the heat of the day, I remember being on a beach in Thailand, and I had a compass with me that would measure the temperature, and I remember sitting on the sand and just thinking, this has got to be the hottest I've ever been in my entire life. And I looked down, and it was 129 degrees Fahrenheit based on my little thing. And so in the rice fields of Cambodia, sometimes it gets really, really hot. And next to the rice fields, they'll have these thatched huts built where it's just four pillars and a thatched roof. And you'll see the rice workers out there just laying. That's all they do is they'll get up at 6 in the morning and work until about 10 o'clock in the morning. And then they'll lay on these wooden slats until it cools down, and then they'll get up and work again. And I think we can all look at that. I even read a meme this week about serfdom, and in medieval times when a lord would have peasants that worked for them, that vacations were often built in for the peasants because they knew that they would be more productive. So which is more productive, a person who works a hard job, that slaves through the heat and slaves through the work and slaves through the labor and just exhausts themselves, or one who gets some rest? And I think we all know the answer to that. And so there's something valuable about a siesta, that you'll experience lower anxiety and stress in your life, which will improve your mental acuity and allow you to do the job and do it with precision and accuracy. And so siesta doesn't say don't work. It says work smart. Rest is working smart. Sabbath is working smart. I read a statistics recently that people who take a full day off, a snow day, once a week, have a 32% less chance of developing some sort of coronary difficulty. Heart disease is diminished by 32% in people who take a day off every week. Now, heart disease is one of the, maybe the number one killer of human beings. I think it is, and has been historically for a very long time. So if somebody came up with a pill the diminished heart disease in human beings by 32%, it would be a big, big moneymaker. If you could advertise that and then go through all the, don't take this or you'll get an erection lasting 4 hours a day and you won't be able to sleep and you'll vomit and there'll be blood coming out everywhere and all this stuff that they list. But people would still take it and buy it because 32% chance diminished off of, sometimes I say things and I think, if I could just back up a little bit. But a 32% less likelihood of coronary difficulty is huge. It's huge. It's almost like God knew what he was talking about when he said, don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery, and take a day off every week. It's almost like he knows some stuff. People who take a day off and take siesta are more productive. It also allows you to put your feet on the ground. Life can become a grind. My father-in-law always said that a man can spend his entire life just beating the bushes back. You can just get so wrapped up in the work, the stress, the job, the putting food on the table, the needing to provide a roof over their heads or keeping gas in the car or whatever, that a lot of times we'll focus on our own strength and our own power. I will do this, I will get it done, I will become a locomotive, and I will go through my life. And Sabbath, the concept of Sabbath allows us to slow that train down and say, what is really important? What am I working so hard for? Because if I'm working so hard and not spending time with my friends and family, my kids, if I'm working so hard and I'm disconnecting with God, I'm not centered, I really have no peace and joy. And sometimes we can hide behind the work. I have no peace and joy, so I'm going to lose myself in something. I'm going to get lost in something. I'm going to vacation, which means I'm going to distract myself. And a forced Sabbath or a premeditated Sabbath forces meditation. It forces recentering. It forces us to hear the wind in the trees and the voices of our children and the voices of our conscience and our heart. It's a very important part of being human. When God established the Sabbath in the law in Exodus, he says, remember that God created the world in 6 days. So he goes back to the creation narrative and says, created the world in 6 days, and on the seventh day he rested. Now, God who is omnipotent, did he need to rest? Or was he establishing something for us to follow? He was establishing something for us to follow. It also shapes money stuff. Now, I know that even putting a picture of a Chick-fil-A building up is controversial in a reach across the aisle church, and I have no intention to wade into that controversy right now. I just want to illustrate one thing. Assuming God is out of the picture, could a business make more money working 7 days a week or 6 days a week? It's our natural inclination to think, if I do the extra work, I couldn't possibly take a full day off because there's so much to do because I have to be productive. And I'm not even talking about whether the blessing of God is over Chick-fil-A or not. But I am saying it bucks the system, doesn't it? I mean, I'm not espousing or denying Chick-fil-A. I'm not saying whether we should pick at them or eat all their chicken sandwiches. I'm not saying that right now. What I am saying is it bucks the system. It says, and I wouldn't care if they were Muslim or Buddhist or Hindu or whatever religion they followed. If it was one of their tenets that said, I want to rest every seventh day, and they did it, that says something about what they're placing their trust in, where they're placing their trust. And I think it does it for us too, is if we think I can't take a Sabbath, what we're saying in some sense is, I can't trust. I have to do this thing. I have to be in control and in power. And then there's feet on the ground part two, which deals with this trust. It keeps you from striving to accomplish that laying down of, I want to say practical ability. Like you have the ability to grind out the seventh day. You have the ability to work harder and work faster. And a lot of our system, and even in the churches, we say work harder, be better, work faster, strive, work. And you can. And you could probably accomplish something with that extra day that you didn't spend in Sabbath. But I think what God is trying to illustrate is here that you accomplished all the wrong things. That this concept of Sabbath says, I won't trust myself to accomplish everything. I will trust one who knows me better. I will trust one that when he says rules like the Ten Commandments, that he does so because he has my best interests at heart. And I believe that. Then there's some really deep balance stuff that we're not going to get into today, but the scriptures teach, and Christian philosophers forever have talked about the idea that there is darkness and light, and one doesn't make sense without the other. And there's seed time and harvest. There's a time to plant seeds, and there's a time to gather seeds. There's a time for hugging, and there's a time for refraining from hugging. There's morning and there's evening. And in the creation narrative, if we revisit it again, it says there's morning and evening. There's morning and evening. There's this cycle. And there's something about the work-rest balance. And so when we talk about taking a day off, we're not talking about becoming a bum who takes every day off. We're talking about finding balance between work and rest because both are important. And so I want to talk about Bob and take a vacation from your problems. This is something we're going to integrate into the rest of this message. It won't take much longer. But life can be really hard. Like I said, my father-in-law said, you can spend your entire life just beating the bushes back. I mean, there's always going to be something in your face. There's always going to be something challenging you. There's always going to be some kind of need. The food in your cabinets is always going to be diminishing. The money in your bank account is always going to be trickling down. Your relationship with your friends, if they're not maintained, diminish. Entropy is at work in the world. And the Sabbath says, I'm going to step away from that system for a minute, and I'm going to evaluate what's really, truly important. And I don't have to win against entropy. I can't win against entropy. I can't win against this diminishment that's going to occur in my life. And there's something wonderfully liberating about stepping away from that mentality that says, I got to win, I got to safeguard, I got to protect, I got to promote security. You're trying to promote security in a world that will never be secure. And Sabbath somehow brings that to head, is that it's okay to step away from those problems. So what is Sabbath exactly? What am I espousing here? Am I saying that Daylight Church is going to start doing nothing on every Saturday and that's just going to be the law from now on? It's not what I'm saying at all. I want to read one pastor's description of what they did on Sabbath. And not as a law, but to kind of give you a picture of what one pastor's snow day. Pastors have an advantage in this because really it's very hard for me to know when I'm logged in and when I'm not. When I'm clocked in at work and when I'm not clocked in. It can be really challenging. If I have lunch with some of you, I'm having lunch with you because you're my friend, or I'm having lunch with you, you're part of my congregation, and that's always a challenge to know. But a pastor has this bonus that if I take a Sabbath, it sounds really spiritual. I mean, the pastor's on Sabbath, well, la-di-da. But it does sound like it's like I'm clocked in, doesn't it? And I recognize that for the person who sprays under houses for pests, or the person who's climbing ladders to put roofs on houses, taking a Sabbath sounds like laziness. It sounds like something different. It sounds real spiritual for a pastor. And so I read this pastor's description knowing that. Well, this is what happened last week, he said. I slept in. I woke up slow and actually made time for breakfast. I went to a worship service with some friends, and then I went to lunch. We didn't rush at all. We ate and just enjoyed the company and conversation. When I got home, I spent some time alone with God, reading scripture and journaling. If you're new to the Bible or journaling, that might sound like a drag. But as I found my rhythm, it's actually become a really energizing time for me. After that, since it was a nice day, I took a long walk before dinner. That night, I hung out with some friends before going to bed at a good hour. So this is one pastor describing his Sabbath day. But am I espousing that everybody needs a day like that baked in their system? I think it's ideal. I'm not going to skirt around that. I think it's good to have that kind of day every week where you wake up and it's a snow day, and it's only a snow day. But I also understand that Rome wasn't built in a day, and I want to say to you that it's okay if you don't have that baked in right now. This is not the hammer-fisted God saying, or the hammer-fisted pastor, I hope, saying, you must take a day off. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying it'd be beneficial for you to look at your work schedule. It'd be beneficial for you to look at the way you strive and work and try, and that train's going down the tracks. It's important to examine that train. Because some people, myself included to a certain extent, if you say you need to take a Sabbath rest day every week, you think, impossible. I have kids. There's no way I could take a Sabbath rest with my kids. Right, no way. But I do want to say that the Israelites had kids, and it's not impossible. That'd be like saying, do not murder, impossible. I'm going to do it. There's no getting around it. I got kids. I had kids. There is a way, and I'm encouraging you to work towards that way. I'm not saying this is going to happen overnight. I'm not saying it's a quick fix. Just do the Sabbath. And I'm not even saying it has to be necessarily a full day. It's an ideal. It's a guideline for life and living. And as we continue, we're going to talk about just moments of Sabbath. But I want you to remember the why behind this. Which kind of God is saying this to you? So I would prefer people not walk up to me and say, I was so convicted today. Convicted isn't what we're going for. Maybe convinced, maybe challenged, but I don't think God, convicted is a right word in some sense. But God is not saying you're doing a really lousy job at getting rest, and doggone it, if you don't get rest, things are going to go to hell in a handbasket real fast. That's not what God's saying at all, and that's not what I want you to walk away from this with, is saying, I'm a miserable human being because I don't take a day off every week. Not the goal at all. But the goal is that you would examine and look. The Israelites, it takes work. It's really funny how to take a Sabbath rest requires work. You can't do it. You can't, without work, it's never going to happen. The Israelites, there was this story in the Old Testament where they were wandering through the desert and God supplied with them food called manna. And one of the funny parts of this story is that they were not supposed to complain about the manna. And I'm thinking, if I had to eat lasagna every day for my entire life, morning, lunch, and dinner, I would get really tired of lasagna really fast. Lasagna is good about 2 days later. And then after that, it's like, no, that was very weird. I recognize that. But they got manna and quail. That's what these people ate for years, manna and quail. And manna would show up on the ground in this story of the miraculous. But it says for 6 days, for 5 days, you're going to gather the manna of morning. Only take what you need, because if you take more than you need, there's a lack of trust thing going on, and it will rot. And so there's an abundance of manna. There's an abundance of stuff out there that they can take in. And he says, and God says to them, just take what you need for that day. It's like the Lord's Prayer where he says, give us this day our daily bread. Because I'm living centered right here, right now. I'm not thinking I have to fix tomorrow. I have to plan ahead. It's just, but it says on the 6th day, gather twice the portion. Now, I don't know what the process was for converting manna and quail into something to eat, but I imagine there was quite a process. I imagine they were working really hard to try to find something interesting to create in a recipe with manna and quail and manna and quail. I don't know if you should be embarrassed or excited about what you just said. But it took work for them to pull off the Sabbath. That 6th day, they had to work twice as hard on their gathering and their cooking and their preparing. I saw one person write about preparing. This person obeys a traditional Sabbath. And she said this. She said, preparing special meals in advance, organizing the Sabbath artifacts, cleaning, and most of all, arranging our schedules for prayer and time together. So when we talk about Sabbath, we're not saying don't work. We're saying you're going to have to put your work somewhere that frees you to not work. And it's a different way of looking at things. It's not laziness at all. It requires work. I've been really proud of Kara, and I've been kind of proud of myself, if I can toot my own horn for a second. I used to take part of Mondays off, and then it seems like ministry and relationships and texts and messages and emails and everything would kind of pile up, and sermon prep. And by Friday, when I really wanted to take a day off, it rarely ever happened. And then we have events on Friday and we have events on Saturday, and it was just not happening. And so recently, I've gotten to where I'm thinking Friday is my day off, period. It's my snow day. Unless we have an event that's been baked into the schedule, in which case I'll try to make space for it somewhere else in the week. Friday is my day. I take Sunday afternoons completely. Friday is my day, and every now and then I get Saturdays with no events. But it means that on Monday I've got to hit the ground running. I can't slow down on Monday and still get Friday off. And I've been proud of my wife, because my wife, we have 4 kids at home, and she's been going on long hikes. She went on an 11-mile, 12-mile hike recently. How many? That's what I said, 14. got with a friend and went for a hike. And every time she talks about it, I should go for a hike this Friday, it's, but there's this, and there's that, and there's this. And then if she goes on a 14-mile hike, she's going to be gone for several hours, and now I've got 4 kids on my day off, and I have to be more comfortable with putting them in front of a TV screen than would feel right. You have to make adjustments in your life. You have to make space for Sabbath. You have to work to get this time off. Some of you are retired and you're thinking, poor dude. and I'm a bit jealous of you. I also want to encourage you to study. There's people who are masters of Sabbathery out there. That sounds like a heavy metal band, doesn't it? We're the masters of Sabbathery. But I'm telling you, if you just type into Google how to Sabbath, now you will get the hammer-fisted people that are, just like the Pharisees said, why are you picking grain on the Sabbath? Why are you doing what's unlawful? You'll get a lot of that. But there's also people that can just encourage you on good tactics and reasoning behind resting. So I encourage you to study. I encourage you to start somewhere. A full day off, a full snow day may be completely, totally impossible and unreasonable for your situation. I think you can get there. I think it's important to start moving there. But in the meantime, you can take temporary Sabbaths. You can take an afternoon. You can take an hour at lunch. You can take a moment to recenter yourself. Say, okay, I'm going to stop striving right now. I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to focus on the one who made this rule because he cares about me. There's this passage in Scripture that says, throw all your anxiety onto him. It says, cast your cares on him in some versions, for he cares for you. The God who established Sabbath knows that your chances of a heart problem are 32% less likely if you'll take a Sabbath. This is a God that cares about you. He knows that your relationships will be stronger if they're unadulterated. He knows that murdering is uncool. He knows that worshiping the wrong idols doesn't lead to thriving in life and doesn't lead to peace the way it should. And he knows that when you take a day off, it's helpful. Paul said this. He said, I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. And he goes on, as we described recently, to say, whether in riches, whether in plenty, or whether in want, whether I've got a whole bunch of good stuff going on in my life or a whole bunch of bad stuff going on in my life, I've learned the secret to be content. And it says this is the bumper sticker that is taken out of context constantly. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So whether I've got everything or whether I've got nothing, I have Christ. And there's something about stopping to center yourself on that idea. 1 Thessalonians says, give thanks in all circumstances. I've had a rough couple weeks for numerous reasons, like anxiety-inducing, heart-racing, not sleeping well weeks. And a couple of you have noticed that and reached out to me, and I appreciate that. And those of you that didn't, it's cool. I'm not trying to elevate those folks. But my wife one time this week said, our kids are healthy. This was part of our conversation. I was explaining to her why I was having such a frustrating time and bouncing my thoughts off of her. And I'm hesitant to say that in case your kids aren't healthy. Like I don't want to make a paper cut and pour lemon juice on it. But that was something centering for me. Is there's these things that seem like they're going wrong. There's these things that hurt. There's these things that are anxiety-inducing. But my kids are healthy. And if my kids were unhealthy, it seems like that would overshadow all that real quick. And there's always this idea of giving thanks in all circumstances is a Sabbath concept. It's the grind, the beating the bushes back. I'm working so hard. I saw a server post her $3 tip on a $100 check recently, and there's just some people out there who are not nice, and it can just be a hard world. But there's always something, and I believe this for a believer. There's always something to stop and say, but there's good. And worst case scenario, you're living the literal worst life a human being ever lived. That's where the scriptures and the story of Jesus come into being and come into this story that says this life is just a breath. Whatever it is, whatever hopelessness you feel, whatever addiction has a grip on you, whatever relationships have been crushed and ruined forever, there's always hope in the gospel in that this timeline is just about done. Colossians 3:2 says, set your mind on things above and not on things below. There's always something to turn your attention to that is positive and healthy, even if your kids aren't healthy, even if your body is failing you, even if your spouse has abandoned you. Whatever the negative thing is, for the believer in Jesus, the follower of Jesus, there's always hope. And so my last piece of advice is that you cease. I mean, cease striving. So you may not be able to take a day off every week. But when those anxieties mount up and they add up, or the relationships are ruined, or the money isn't in the bank account, you stop saying, I got to fix this. I can fix this. It doesn't, and again, I want to be clear. I'm not saying don't work. I'm saying there's a power bigger than you involved here. Trust it. Turn to Psalm 46 with me, and we'll close with this idea. Psalm 46 has a lot of martial imagery in it, a lot of calamity. It says, God is our refuge and strength, and ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea. We're talking major calamity here. Though the waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with surging, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her, she will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice, the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us, the God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes war cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bows and shatters the spears. He burns the shields with fire. So up until now it said calamity, earthquake, winds, floods, enemies abounding, swords and spears, martial imagery and calamity. And then it says this. He says, be still and know that I am God. And this word, be still in the Hebrew, it kind of means lay down your arms. I wrote it out because I didn't want to forget some of it, but it says abandonment. It says to become helpless, to cease, to collapse, to hang limp, to relax, to loosen up, to subside, to let alone, to become feeble. It's this idea that, and the Sabbath thing is somehow tied up in this, is that you can't keep beating the bushes back and win against the bushes. The bushes are going to win one day. Your strength will fail. It'll give out. It's going to happen. But it's a safe place to say, I can't. It's one of the safest places you can possibly be ever in your life is to say, I can't do it. I lay down my arms. I abandon all hope. Because there is one who grants hope. There is one who takes up arms in my defense. There is one who cares, who's established his rules because he sees me, he knows me, and he loves me. And into that person's hands, that's where I commit myself, is to the hands of the God who sees me and says, be still, and you will see. That's what it means. Be still and know that I'm God. It says, lay it down, then you'll see that I am God.